Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome and thank you for joining us today. I am Felicia Harris. I am the Administrator of Planning and Policy here at the City of Memphis Division of Housing and Community Development. And I am the Project Manager for Memphis Heritage Trail. And today we're going to be, in a moment, hearing from Mr. Lakethen Mason, author of today's book, Our Neighbors, Our Stories. And we look forward to him telling us all about that. After we hear from him for about 15 minutes or so, we will move into our question and answer period segment of our program, then our closing remarks. Since we are attending today's event virtually, we ask that you sign in by putting in your name and your email address, so we definitely can add you to our mailing list and keep you abreast of all things Memphis Heritage Trail. So I would like to take a moment just to introduce Memphis Heritage Trail to you. Memphis Heritage Trail is an initiative by the City of Memphis Division of Housing and Community Development. We started this project in 2008. I actually started the planning for it. And Memphis Heritage Trail look at the contributions of African Americans to our city in respect to all things history and culture, business, intellectual innovation, as well as community and economic development. And so without further ado, Lauren Barksdale, our moderator today, will be sharing with us a lot more about Memphis Heritage Trail as we move on. Lauren is a native Memphian, and she holds a lifelong passion for preserving public history in Memphis, and she has a background in English and African American history, and African American studies rather, from the University of Memphis. And she's a former educator and now work with us here at the City of Memphis. And she will be introducing our speaker for today. So without further ado, I would turn it over to Lauren Barksdale. And I think that we can just continue the background music. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining our monthly virtual book series. It's where we host local authors and their latest work highlighting the history, culture, and the legacies of African Americans in Memphis. And so today, our book is Our Neighbors, Our Stories by Lakethen Mason. A few announcements regarding the Memphis Heritage Trail. Forthcoming in the summer, the Memphis Heritage Trail will host the Memphis Heritage Trail Neighborhood Tours. showcasing recently installed new wayfinding signage in South City, Soulsville, and there you can learn more about the rich history of the communities as well as its residents. Join the Memphis Heritage Trail, the Memphis Brand, and Memphis Filmworks at the annual Juneteenth Festival in Douglas Park. We will host community conversations and oral history interviews with the residents of Douglas from 1 to 5 p.m. on June the 17th and June the 18th. That will be Friday and Saturday. Feel free to drop by the Memphis Heritage Trail's tent and share your story. Our next virtual book series will be July 13th. We will feature Allison Manning and her latest children's book, Can I Play With My Food? We welcome you to download the Memphis Heritage Trail app, visit the Memphis Heritage Trail website at www.memphisheritagetrail.com, and to follow the Memphis Heritage Trail on our social media platforms. We are launched on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please feel free to like, share, and comment on today's event, as well as dropping your emails in the chat room. All right. Without further delay, it brings me a great pleasure to introduce our guest for the hour. After spending 2 decades working in the private sector, Lakethen Mason decided to pursue his passion for the arts full-time, capturing important moments through the camera lens. A longtime enthusiast for the Memphis and Mid-South legacy and culture, Lakethen feels strongly about the need to develop homegrown stories that reflect humanity and the spirit of hope, transformation, and redemption. No stranger to the entertainment world, Lakethen continues to lend his talent and time as an independent songwriter, artist manager, event producer, and all-around promoter of Memphis. As a founding member of Memphis Filmworks, Lakethen and his team are hard at work building and hosting a catalog of documentaries, made-for-TV series, and live event programming that engage, empower, and connect along the lines of what maximizes our potential and minimizes our divide. It is Lakethen's strong belief and favorite quote by philosopher Howard Thurman: "Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who come alive." This has been his motto for building his own pathway to success and hopes to inspire others with this same belief. Without further delay, I am honored to present to you all Mr. Lakethen Mason.
Hello. Well, thank you very much for the introduction.
Thank you, Lakethen, and I turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction again, and really happy to be a part of this series. As Lauren said, I'm the founder of Memphis Filmworks, which we founded back in 2016. And since then, we've been working tirelessly to develop and build a repository of historical and cultural information that helps our residents see themselves and hopefully provides some hope and presence for making greater decisions, better decisions for our communities that we serve. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Lakethen. I don't know whether viewers are seeing you. I think they're still seeing the promo of the book.
Okay, either is fine.
Okay, 1 second. Please give us 1 moment to correct it.
Will there be questions asked?
Yes.
Okay.
You can go ahead and continue. We will get it fixed. Thank you.
Okay. Our Neighbors, Our Stories began as a journey to get to know the many neighbors throughout our different communities. As you know, we're a city of neighborhoods, and oftentimes there are certain neighborhoods that don't always get the exposure or the opportunity to talk about what they love and what they desire for the city and for their own particular community. So in 2019, we received the support of the Kresge Foundation. And the Kresge Foundation allowed us to set up a plan to interview over 300 families and residents of Memphis in neighborhoods that oftentimes go unseen or unheard. At the end of the day, we actually interviewed 600 families and residents in a 2-year period, and then decided to place some of those interviews, which were oral narratives collected audio and visually via filming, transcribing those and interpreting those into single essays of 100 residents per book. So this is a multi-book series. You'll be seeing more stories coming forward, more volumes of Our Neighbors, Our Stories, In Search of Common Ground. That subtitle, In Search of Common Ground, is very important in the sense that when we're looking at the diversity of our culture, but also the primary African-American experience of Memphis, we see oftentimes there are stories that that mean a lot to the history and the culture of our city. And so taking the time to be able to go door to door, walk in the park, sit in church pews, front porches, back porches, getting to know many of our neighbors, the hundreds of neighbors that participated in this journey, it was extremely fulfilling. And it really gave us an opportunity to not only allow their voices to be heard and to be seen, but also understand during this pandemic and coming out of this pandemic, how we move forward as a collective culture, as a collective resident of our city and our community. What ideas do our neighbors have that could help catapult our city to be considered and seen as a global city? I've been around the country as a songwriter, as a record producer, as an artist manager, or lived in other cities. And when people think of Memphis, they actually think of Memphis in a very high regard based upon our history, based upon our culture. And I wanted to make sure that we were able to hone in on those residents and those neighbors who exemplify Memphis, who exemplify the everyday struggle and the everyday fight to make our city great, to keep our city great, and to make sure that those voices are heard loud. So we're very happy to present Our Neighbors, Our Stories, In Search of Common Ground, and we hope that it becomes a continuous almanac and anthropologic roadmap for how we continue to discover and rediscover the promise of Memphis.
Thank you, Lakethen. So to start off our Q&A, I'd like to ask, what was one of the most memorable experiences you've had interviewing the residents of Memphis?
Well, the most memorable experiences, I would say the Kleenex, just the ability to speak to Mrs. Thurman, who is one of our elder residents who spent over 50 years as a cross guard for Douglas High School, to know that that was so singularly important to her to make sure that young kids cross the street. In her storytelling, her granddaughter would joke with her saying, yeah, she gave up trips to France with us to make sure that young people knew that she was not going to let them down, that she was going to show up and that she was going to be there. So valuable stories like that, where you have community members that put their community first. They make sure that there's safety, there's security, and there's love, right? Mm-hmm. Also having those memorable experiences of walking in the park with neighbors. I would say jokingly, even this is what a camera person is supposed to do, or should be able to do, is walk backwards to make room for the presence, the coming presence of the voice of their subject or of their people. So I enjoyed many days walking backwards in the park
Mhm.
while our residents walked forward and they exhaled their desires for the city. I remember being in the park speaking with Miss Pam Ralph, who is a triathlon organizer, and she became a triathlon organizer because of her developed passion for cycling and for being a part of the sport. It was a part of her confidence, building her confidence in life. She took her building and confidence and shared it with the entire city by being an organizer and creator of one of our many triathlons that we see throughout the city. And you know, Memphis has so many great events, uh, golf or St. Jude Classics, festivals, etc. But being able to actually have uh, conversations with people who are everyday residents, and they go along and they're doing what they're passionate about, not often seeking recognition, but just doing the work. And
Mhm.
those were hundreds of those stories were just about doing the work, being present in the city, contributing their gift, their talent, and their passion to making this city what it is today. So Our Neighbors, Our Stories was an opportunity to to be able to identify those everyday residents who are not
Mhm.
above the radar, who are just at the radar doing what their passion tells them to do to make sure Memphis is a global city.
Yes.
That was most memorable.
Yeah, thank you. And we have a question from one of our guests. Thank you, Dr. Keith Lee, for joining us this afternoon. Dr. Lee is asking, did you interview any artists about their work in Memphis and neighborhoods?
Absolutely. We interviewed singers, entertainers, muralists, painters, you name it. I'm an artist myself, so I take pride in knowing that art and culture was one. We Art changes culture. Art elevates culture.
Mhm.
So we had an opportunity to speak with artists like Dimitri Stevens, who is an amazing artist in the Crosstown, Midtown area. We had an opportunity to speak with Arnold Thompson, who is a longtime muralist, painter, and architectural designer of installations that you find in the park. And what I loved about Mr. Thompson's story, uh, besides the fact that his grandparents were entrepreneurs in the Douglas community, was that he was responsible for being able to help First Tennessee Bank evolve in their mural expression of African Americans being cotton pickers
Mhm.
from the economy to now replacing that mural with a mural that represented Robert Church as an entrepreneur, as
Mhm.
well as Ida B. Wells. He was the first painter and muralist that was commissioned to help change the narrative and to elevate the narrative, as I would say. Because of course, there are things that are part of our history, that's a part of our history that is important for us to
Mhm.
understand and to never forget. But the evolution of that, seeing as though that there are individuals that may have evolved their families from being cotton pickers as a contributor to the economy to actually being change makers and catalysts for journalism and catalysts for building auditoriums and spaces and bank and insurance companies like Robert Church did that changed the economic status of African Americans in the city of Memphis. So hopefully I've answered that question. But yes, we interviewed many artists, muralists, painters, singers, writers, and poets who have done an exceptional job in
Mhm.
building our narrative and building our story in the last 100 years, the last 50 years.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for
And
the
I
question.
invite Thank you, Dr. Keith. Thank you. I welcome additional guests to please feel free to leave your questions either in our chat room, and then also you are allowed to unmute yourself to ask your questions to Lakethen. So we have another question for you, Lakethen. What makes the neighborhoods and the communities of Memphis so unique and diversified? You know, if you go into Memphis, you see that not every neighborhood is the same.
Not every neighborhood is the same, and that's what I loved about this experience. And I'll start that by saying I was heavily influenced by Memphis Heritage Trail. The Memphis Heritage Trail really gave me a base for understanding the need to go into different neighborhoods and understand the distinction of what that neighborhood is about and the strength of those neighborhoods in terms of their history. We're seeing a lot of changes happening to our historic neighborhoods. We're seeing economic decline. We're seeing some environmental concerns that's happening when you have an aging community or aging neighborhood. And so it was very important to make sure that there was some level of understanding of what the distinction is of what made or continues to make that neighborhood special, and a special part and a special ingredient to our culture and our community here in Memphis. I did not know all of the neighborhoods that I've learned and been able to go through and walk through. We walk through 40 neighborhoods in Memphis, right? And I know that HCD understands that there are 200 registered neighborhoods, but the average Memphian or the Memphian that's going about their life has no idea what the distinction of those neighborhoods are. And until you bring it to their attention, they really don't care, right? So I chose to care. I chose to go to Douglas, the Douglas community. And as I was researching and speaking to families in Douglas, found out my grandmother's birth certificate says Douglas, Tennessee, 1927. I didn't know, right? I did know that we have a lot of family in Douglas, but I didn't know my grandmother, was born there and raised there a few years in the first primary years of her life. And then to be able to go to Alcee Ball, which is a thriving South Memphis community that was founded in the 60s on the distinction of having homes for principals, educators, teachers, firemen, the first African-American fire chief living in that particular community. The strength of Orange Mound, as we've all come to know based upon their culture, their legacy, their familiarity with being one of the first African American communities established and identified as a historical place and location for African Americans, and then being able to go to the Heights area on summer and understand the distinction and even the evolution of the Latino community in that particular area, and how wonderful and beautiful each of those areas are and continue to be. So I began to believe that our differences within our community is our strength. We don't have to be the same. We don't have to have the same pavement. We don't have to have the same sidewalks. We don't have to have the same greenways. But the fact that we know that we are connected and our differences is actually what is our maximization of the potential of our city, is what we can go forward in post-pandemic, to say, yes, we are Memphis. We are Memphians who are strong, and our story is built upon a true diversity of distinction that makes us who we are, right? So I've enjoyed the journey, and as I was saying with Memphis Heritage Trail, and also being the project manager for the I'm a Man MLK 50, being able to see so many different faces and people who are civil rights leaders, who were the activists of Lemoyne-Owen College, who came off the campus, did marches, did sit-ins, were able to integrate libraries like the Cossett Library that was not open to African Americans during that day. Now being able to see those young people in the 1960s or the 1950s who were 18 and 19, to now seeing those same individuals 70, 80 years old still in the fight, when we talk about Dr. David Acey and Mrs. Yvonne Acey, who are still leaders in the community, who have spent 40 years, the last 40 years, building Africa in April here in the city, which is one of our premier cultural festivals, to be able to sit down and speak with Dr. Acey and Miss Yvonne Acey and have those conversations with him at a moment in their life when they could have retired, they could have faded back, but they have not. They have sustained culture in Memphis. And so being able to celebrate even those individuals is really a continuous growth and pride for me, and to see them still in the community the way they are, active as they are. Miss Elaine Turner, who we know was one of the 3 Lee sisters, who was one of the most arrested on file civil rights activists in the 50s and 60s. To know that she has continued a historical journey to preserve the history of the African American experience here in Memphis blows my mind. To know that she has been able to preserve the W.C. Handy House, that she's been able to look at the Slave Haven Museum and create a museum, an artifact that shows our roadmap of from slavery to freedom, and how the Mississippi River connected our individuals to freedom via the Mississippi River to get them to Ohio. And that was a part of the Memphis journey. So yes, I get excited when I talk about these individuals. And when I approach them, or when I was given the opportunity to speak with them, I had to remember that I could not be this awestruck fan, but I was awestruck every time I sat down with individuals like them. And they're in the book, they're in the first volume, and there's so many more that you will be able to see in upcoming volumes and series.
Yes, and so Vanessa, she's going to share, as you mentioned, that there were so many different people that were connected to your project to just make it what it is. And it's very interesting for those of you that do not know about the community of Douglas. As you mentioned, Lakethen, it was a separate city, so to speak. It didn't become a part of Memphis until the 1950s. And so just like Orange Mound, has very historical value. It was founded by an African American man, the community of Douglas. And so stories like that, really resonate with the history of Memphis. And we have another question that is asked, that what are some of the themes and community events that were frequently mentioned as common ground in storytelling?
Can you repeat that question again? So I'll make sure I'm giving you.
Yes. What are some of the themes and community events that were frequently mentioned as a common ground in storytelling?
Yeah, I would, man, there were so many events. So I would say what gave us an advantage and a disadvantage was the fact that we were exploring these stories during one of the most turbulent times in our history, that being COVID. But also that being the resurgence of the social civil rights movement via George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, and what was happening during that time, the energy that was taking place. And so we were able to we were showing up at many events, hundreds of events, whether they were mobile pantries that was trying to feed communities, or events that were there were sit-ins and protest events that protested the mistreatment of African Americans, young African Americans. We actually, when I say we, it's me and my Canon. Oftentimes my Canon camera is my human friend. So that becomes my we oftentimes, even though we did have support throughout the process. But we showed up at the protest. We showed up at the church events. We showed up at the picnics. We were when I think about Miss Angela Barksdale and some of the amazing things that she has been able to accomplish, she wanted to redesign Orange Mound Park and bring amenities to the park that was up to the level of many other premier parks in the city. case in point with the Whitehaven Park community park. So we stood beside Miss Angela Barksdale and watched her host several events that made Orange Mound proud. That October in Orange Mound, and even prior to the experience of getting the support from the Kresge Foundation, Memphis Filmworks was invited to sit in like a classroom member, but I was a classroom member like a camera at Memphis Heritage Trail Summer Institute, Summer Teachers Institute, where I saw you all teaching history about Memphis and what we have gone through in not only the last 50 years, but the last 200 years, how we've been a major contributor to the Memphis story. And so I remember standing behind the camera in awe of all the knowledge that the leaders and teachers like yourself was actually sharing with the community, and then getting them to come together to via the sharing stage of how would they communicate that, and how would they have conversations with young people or with the schools that they were part of to make sure that there was a consciousness of equity within the teaching and within the sharing. So I would say that was very inspiring to me to be in the classroom and to be invited to actually to document those experiences. And based upon that experience itself, I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to say, I want to knock on the doors. I want to go over to Klondike and Smoky City and talk to Miss Elaine Johnson or Mr. Shaw, Reginald Shaw. I want to talk to those individuals that didn't come to that meeting, and I want to go deeper with our conversation on what it means to be a Memphian and what it means to be a Memphian who either sacrifices, has sacrificed, or is willing to sacrifice for the greater good of humanity. So I can go on and on about events.
Yeah, that's great. So what's next? I mean, may we expect another phase of our neighbors? If so, is there something intentional that you're looking for or to possibly capture, or you're going to go into it like, you did in the first phase?
No, I think we have a plan now.
Okay.
And I say that tongue in cheek because I had no idea that we would be so far along in this journey, and that we would come as far as we have. To be able to say that in 2 years we had conversations with 600 families, and that when I say families and residents, 600 means that we did this 600 times. That means that we have actually engaged over 1,000 people in our journey to understand the common ground of Memphis and what Memphis is about. But the culmination of it all is, how do we become better neighbors and good neighbors for each other? How do we show up for one another in a manner that's powerful, that is not subjective, but subjective enough to say you deserve to be at this table because you are a Memphian, right? And because you're a Memphian, you wear the golden medal of being able to offer your suggestions on how to make it better. So that's what in terms of what's next. The next is making sure that Memphis is celebrating good neighbors, that in our culture, we are the neighborly city, right? And so what that means is there's more Our Neighbors, Our Stories books coming out. This is volume 1 of volume 12. And hopefully volume 12 becomes a never-ending volume.
Yeah.
I laugh, and I'll share this really quickly. As a college student, I went to Florida A&M University, and a part of our curriculum of being in the business program was to have 3 internships. We had to make sure that we finished 3 internships, and one of those internships, my freshman year, was to be a door-to-door salesman for publishing company out of Nashville, and they had this 3-volume African American encyclopedia that talked about African American history. It was in 3 volumes, and we had to relocate to a city that was unfamiliar, and that city was Richmond, Virginia, and we had to go find a place to stay because lodging was not provided, and we had to go out there and collect receipts and sales that where the books would be delivered at the end of the summer. So I spent my entire summer delivering African American encyclopedias in Richmond, Virginia, and they had to trust that I would come back with their book after collecting their money. And this experience right now, in terms of Our Neighbors, Our Stories, is it brings back so many memories, because not only were people trusting that their information and the stories that they shared would be seen and would be heard and valued, but they trusted that it would make it back to their door.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm making sure that it gets to their door.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like 19-year-old in Richmond, Virginia. And I'm now 49, so that's 40 years ago. I think, well, no, 30 years ago. Don't ask me, give me, but I can deliver.
Absolutely. And I one of the things, for those of you that did not know, Lakethen hosted an event on, I believe it was May the 27th at the Holleran Center.
Yes.
And that night, as I sat in the back of the room and just looked at the faces of the people that had been interviewed, the residents that had been interviewed, there was so much pride on their faces and so much honor. And I think that there's a misconception that is lost in Memphis, but it's not. And your work shows that is still there, and that, like you said, the legacy of being a good neighbor is still alive, is just as well as it was 50 years ago, when you could knock on the door of your neighbor, borrow a cup of sugar. Your neighbor could look out for you, in your home. You can invite your neighbor into your home. And so I think that it's just very important work that is a constant reminder that we have not lost the essence of our city, the heart of our city. And so we have another question.
We must never lose it.
We must never lose it. So we have another question. How are you planning to preserve this information, and where are you planning to archive the film?
Well, in terms of I'll answer the last question. In terms of archiving the films and the stories, our next stage is to work with CDCs and neighborhood organizations to design kiosks where neighbors can actually, inside of their neighborhood, can actually see their family's story being on video. And of course, we have the books for them as well. So that is an important next step, which requires support and sponsors and all that good stuff. But what is really important to me, besides the Library of Congress and the public library system, is that our residents who participate in the experience of Our Neighbors, Our Stories have direct access to it. And there are no there are no hindrances or barriers to how close their information can be to them. So our next stage, our next goal is to work inside of the organization, work inside of the community with community organizations that would be a host to kiosks where family stories can be displayed and can be continuously shared for perpetuity, right? That is a very, very big goal. It's also another goal to work with organizations like HCD, like Memphis Heritage Trail, to make sure that there becomes a larger repository that is accessible through their channels as well. Being in that position, it's a big deal, right? And it is something that's really important that we do. because it's really about it's about the residents. It's about being able to have the access to that information and to their stories, where they can say, hey, you can go to the Carnita, was it Carnita? We can go to
Cornelia,
South City.
yeah, Cornelia
Thank
Crenshaw Library.
you. Thank you. It was escaping me. We can go there, and and we were able to look up your mom or your grandmom's
They going
story.
from it's gonna mess with me.
So that is something that is a kind of a next stage there. There are other next stages, making sure that we're able to continue the book series and the film series, getting those films out, but making sure that we're continuing to write these books and
Right.
to make sure that these books become an important, I say, almanac, right? What happened in 2019 was the precursor for what happened in 2020 through 2002. It was one of the most important times in our history. And to
Yes.
know that we were able to tap in and engage residents and families in one of the most horrific times in our history, it should say something about our ability to be restorative, our ability to be resilient, and our ability to be great neighbors in any time, but especially in the time of distress. The one last piece I wanted to add, and I think this is also important, in terms of writing this book and getting this particular anthology series together, it was a community effort. So if you can imagine, I walked the walk. I went and listened to hundreds of resident stories. And then we invited a number of artists and poets and writers into the circle, because I was so happy to just share, say, hey, here's lots of stories, but here's your talent. Can you help us interpret these stories and make them special for each family and resident that's a part of the series? So we had artists and writers that did the research and was able to help us come up with this 500-page oral narrative collection. People like Karen Malone, who's a very well-known poet, Rhonda Holloway. They would kill me because I'm not saying their poetic names, but I just, I'm still a little corporate in that sense. Steve Fox, who we're getting to know very well, was part of that journey. Connie Scanlon, who was a part of that journey, and those names go on and on. But this was a collective community effort. This common ground brought over 20 people together to culminate into this book series. And we still have 200 stories that they have already written that's waiting to be put and pressed into a book. So volume 2 is ready.
Wow.
And we're ready to share, and we're ready to explore. Of course, the next step is continuing that. So I hope I've answered your question, but there's a lot more work to do. We're just getting started.
And you mentioned that you're looking for, a place as far as housing, and just wanted to bring to the attention of our audience that currently the historic Melrose High School, it will be turned into a library and genealogy center. And so the Memphis Public Libraries will be a great place to archive the book and the documentary. So for those that do not have a copy of Our Neighbors, Our Stories, I most certainly have my copy. How might the audience be able to purchase?
Right now, you can order online and on www.ourneighborsourstories.org. And we're going to be establishing a number of pop-up celebrations where neighbors can come and pick their books up. They can come and celebrate with us. They can get an autographed signed copy, if they want that. But right now, all of the purchases are being made online via our website, ourneighborsourstories.org. If there are any individuals or residents that want to share their stories in future volumes, I would love to hear from you as well, and you can let us know that through the inquiry platform and template there. So that would be the first approach of being able to order the book and receive it.
Thank you. And how do we get a copy of an autograph? How do we get an autograph copy of your book? Thank you, Ms. Joyce, for that question.
An autograph copy, well, I mean, I can put a few dollars in my gas tank and come to wherever you are. Because I mean, I don't mind. I'm going to tell you, this is a labor of joy. It has been, and I'm happy to see Ms. Cox on here, because she's been very instrumental in helping me understand why our communities shine and why we should all smile about our communities, and why we should all receive the taste of Memphis and walk away cooking more ingredients that keeps our neighborhoods special. And so I celebrate Ms. Joyce for the 30 years that she's contributed to housing, community development, neighborhoods, and that's definitely inspiration to the work that I want to continue doing.
Absolutely. And for those of you that do not know, Ms. Joyce Cox is a part of our housing and community development team, and she works exclusively with the neighborhoods in Memphis, and she is a wealth of knowledge on the history of these communities. I spent the other day in her office, and I'm just like, I got to come back up here every day just to get these gems of information that you have. So thank you, Ms. Joyce, for joining us. Lakethen, I'm sorry.
Many hands make the load light. I'm gonna leave it on that. Many, if I need to get that right, Ms. Joyce, let me know. Many hands make the load light. So if we all put in, we all do our part, we all gonna be good. So thank you.
Yes. Now, in Lakethen, you will be at the Juneteenth Festival this weekend. So, with the audience or the Memphis area, will they be able to purchase your book there?
Yes, I believe on Sunday we're working with The Time Is Now Douglas to provide. We're having a panel discussion about the book for some of the families that were in the book, and also just a part of the film series. So there will be a discussion and a number of books made available, courtesy of HCD, actually. No pun intended. But there will be a number of books available on Sunday for Douglas residents to pick up, to purchase. We'll be doing book signings with autographs there, and we'll be doing a discussion about how do we continue building upon the legacy of the Douglas community that began very, very early. I think 1907. So early 1900s, right on the heels of Orange Mound. Douglas Park Douglas was founded and named and provided for African Americans. That 40 acres was Douglas. And I want to tell you what I love about that particular story is that what people don't know is that there's only two cities or two neighborhoods that was officially named after Frederick Douglass. And Memphis has one of those communities. I looked that up to make sure I wasn't wrong. I was like, Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, the orator of the century time, only had two communities in his honor. But the great thing is Memphis is one of them.
Yes, absolutely. And for those of you that did not know, that Douglas was founded by a former slave, and so he exclusively expanded that community. And so if we wanted to see the film and we missed it, how can we see that film?
Yep. So we're working with the Humanities Council and the Assisi Foundation, which, by the way, was very instrumental in supporting the publishing of the first book. So we work with them to make sure they work with us to make sure that it was accessible to the community itself. But I'm sorry, ask that question again. What was your
The film, if we missed the
oh, the film?
documentary. Mhm.
Yeah. So, because I just got off the phone with him. So what we are doing is that we are wanting to bring the neighborhood films, plural, to the neighborhoods that we've been a part of. So, for instance, this weekend, we're doing a screening of Douglas Residents. So that particular film will be solely dedicated to the faces and the voices of Douglas. And next month we will be in Housey Ball. And so we are looking at 9 communities right now,
Okay.
based upon our reach and capacity, to do very distinctive films that relate directly to the neighborhood that they are telling stories about. And we're going to the neighborhood as opposed to having the neighborhood try to find us.
Absolutely.
We'll be doing screenings in the neighborhood, in the park. If the weather is nice in October, we're going to be out there in the park, somewhere in Orange Mountain. Orange Mountain in October? That will be our third big film screening. I would say we were talking about the genealogy of Orange Mound. Orange Mound would not let me go. I think we have about 6 stories in Orange Mound, and actually some of those stories started way before this project with the centennial. Memphis Film Works. We documented the centennial, the 100-year anniversary. We're also documented the reimagining, the reopening of the old Melrose School. So we have lots of interviews and footage about the esteem of Orange Mound residents wanting to now create what we now know as a genealogy center. They were talking about ideas and their heart and their desire. And I'm proud to say that Memphis Filmworks has been a part of all of that.
Yes, and so for those of you that did not get a copy or didn't get a chance to view the film, Lakethen will be at the Juneteenth Festival in Douglas Park. He'll be there on Sunday speaking exclusively about our neighbors, our stories. And so the Memphis Heritage Trail will be hosting oral history conversations, community conversations as well. On Friday, June the 17th and June the 18th, and Lakethen will be closing it out with his panel discussion on the 19th. So you'll have several opportunities to really just get your hands and witness what it's like to share your stories. And so thank you again, Lakethen, for taking the time today to join us and just discuss your website. And so for those of you that would like to know the events, you can check out the Juneteenth Festival's website for the events and the scheduling. And so that is at Douglas Park. And it's near the new Douglas High School. And so our next virtual book series will be July the 13th, and we will feature Miss Allison Manning and her latest children's book, Can I Play With My Food? We welcome you to download the Memphis Heritage Trail app, visit the Memphis Heritage Trail website at www.memphisheritagetrail.com, and to follow the Memphis Heritage Trail on social media platforms. We're launched on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please feel free to like, share, and comment on today's event. It will be available on our YouTube page where you can go back and you can view, or feel free to share to someone that was unable to attend today. Please sign in the chat by writing your name and email address so we can keep you updated on all things Memphis Heritage Trail. Thank you all for once again attending our monthly virtual book series, and we'll see you in July.